Welcome back to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. My name is Derek Brown. And in this week's video, we're going to talk about 8 players that you and ECR and FantasyPros.com should be higher on. Before we get to those 8 players, got to discuss, again, all of the research I'm going to discuss for these 8 players you can find at FantasyPros.com. In the primer, my weekly article going through all of this. So head to FantasyPros.com right now. Check out the article. Let's get to these players. Okay, first guy up here on the list, and I have not been the kindest to him as far as analysis because he's honestly looked pretty bad for most of the year, but this week, I'm in on it. Aaron Rodgers coming in at QB 14 and ECR and FantasyPros.com, and this all goes down to not only did we see a flash of pulse from this Jets passing attack last week, but the matchup lines up perfectly for them to also have another statement game through the air this week. Arizona's pass defense has not been good, people. They're allowing the 9th highest yards per attempt, the 10th highest CPOE, and oh, looky, the highest success rate per dropback. If Aaron Rodgers and this passing attack want to continue to build upon the momentum of last week, they're going to show out this week, and that means Aaron Rodgers is probably a top 10, top 12 fantasy quarterback for week 10. All right, moving away from quarterbacks and over to tight end, got to talk about Jonnu Smith. Tight end 15 in ECR right now, and I think he could be a tight end 1 this week. So if you're in dire straits, you need a streaming option, look to Jonnu Smith. Since week 8, Jonnu has gotten almost a 19% target share in this Miami passing attack, a 21% first read share, and honestly, this is, you want to talk about what's hurting Jaylen Waddle? It's the ascension of Devon Achane in the passing game and Jonnu Smith. And it's going to continue to hurt him this week. The Rams have allowed the 6th most receiving yards to tight ends and the 3rd most fantasy points per game to this position. Jonnu Smith can get in the end zone and pile up yardage this week and be a top 12 fantasy tight end for week 10. All right, now we're going to kind of break into the wide receivers here, and I'm going to go down the list. And I know you're saying, oh, you're just trying to pick out something to be cute, and it's too deep. It's too deep. I don't want to. Look, if you got multiple players on bye, or you've got players that are injured, or we don't know if they're going to even play this week, you might need to consider flexing Ray McCloud. Currently wide receiver 52 in ECR, and this comes down to, okay, can there be more target volume opened up for McCloud this week if Drake London, we know he's not going to be 100%. But if he's limited, if he's out, even if he plays, there's still a path to McCloud being a really strong wide receiver 3 or flex play this week, and it comes down to the matchup. New Orleans is a team that has basically given up, and that is even with firing their head coach, which, hello, woo, hallelujah, baby, Dennis Allen is gone. But back to McCloud. New Orleans has allowed the 10th most fantasy points per game and the 9th highest passer rating when targeted for slot wide receivers. This all means that Ray McCloud can score a touchdown this week and be a great flex play for your lineups. Okay, staying in the flex wide receiver range of wide receiver 3 area code here. I've got to mention Odunze, wide receiver 31 right now in ECR. And some of this comes down to, since they returned from the bye, we've seen the Bears looking to get the ball in Odunze's hands more often. He's had it since week 8. A 20% target share, a 35.3% air yard share, 2.1 yards per route run. It's been very, very nice. And almost a 23% first read share. And you look at how the Bears can attack this secondary for New England this week. Okay, Christian Gonzalez probably shadowing DJ Moore. That leaves targets going to Cole Kmet. New England's pretty good versus tight ends. Okay, so we're left with Keenan Allen and Odunze, and Odunze has been the player who's been hot as of late. I mean, he came out of the bye, led the team in first read share, his first game back. That didn't happen last week, but this is all to say that Odunze is an ascending player. The matchup dictates targets are going to flow in his direction. I think he can come away with another fantastic outing in week 10. All right, before breaking into the top 4 of this list, if you are juggling multiple fantasy football teams and feeling just a tad bit overwhelmed, Fantasy Pros is here to help you simplify things. With the Fantasy Pros Multi-League Assistant, you can see all of the latest news, notes, and rankings for every single player across all of your teams. It is all in one spot, making your path to victory clearer and easier. Dive in and let us help you dominate all of your leagues with a multi-league assistant at fantasypros.com/myplaybook or on the Fantasy Football My Playbook app. Download it today. Okay, breaking into the top 4 of this list, staying on the wide receiver position, I have to discuss somebody that didn't get enough love and waiver wire stuff, and I'm sorry, Andrew Erickson. You said it in Slack. This is me owning the L, and I'm apologizing to you, sir, because look, Parker Washington is in the video this week. We got to talk about him. Wide receiver 53 in ECR. He is a wondrous flex play. And I know. You're watching this, the first thing you're going to say is, but what about Trevor Lawrence? Okay, Jacksonville's still going to throw the ball. Okay, maybe the target quality isn't as good as Trevor Lawrence, but even a less than 100% Trevor Lawrence, we've seen what that looks like. If he's out this week, is it that much of a downgrade? It's some, but maybe not a ton to consider, oh, forget about Parker Washington. But back to Mr. Washington and why you need to consider playing him this week. Last week, he had a 91% route share, almost a 20% target share in that offense, and it was a terrible matchup for slot wide receivers. And if you're looking at the season-long stats, I'm here to tell you they lie to you. Cooper DeJean has been the truth as the Eagles' corner, the nickel corner so far. So don't go off of that. But despite the bad matchup, Parker Washington got almost that 20% target share, and he got a 23% first read share. So he is an integral part of this passing attack. And if you look at the matchup this week, Minnesota has allowed the 4th most receiving yards and the 4th most fantasy points per game to opposing slot wide receivers. Parker Washington can walk away from this week as a wide receiver 3 and a great flex option for all of your fantasy teams. All right, breaking into the top 3 of this list, and I know you're adding up the numbers in your head and you're saying, oh, these are the top 3 players, and we got some other guys to talk about here. I'm going back to the twofer. You've been watching these videos and you've seen me discuss both these Pittsburgh Steelers running backs before. Well, we're back there, baby. We know what the Steelers want to do, and that is run the ball, and that has helped Najee Harris over the last 3 weeks immensely. We're kind of dismissing him a little bit right now in ranks. He's the RB22. And I get it feels comfy, cozy to put him as an RB2, but it's kind of dismissive considering that low-end RB2 status over the last 3 weeks. Been the RB10, RB17, RB15. Okay, pretty good, Mr. Harris. As well as averaging almost 20 touches per game, 118.3 total yards per game. And now they get a team where it is a definitive run funnel with Washington's pass defense really picking up the slack. This is a run funnel. You don't have to ask the Steelers to want to run the ball 40, 50 times a game, okay? I know it sounds hyperbolic because it is. But they're going to run the ball a ton. And this is all going to lead to Najee Harris getting fed yet again. 20-plus touches incoming this week against a Washington run defense that has allowed the 2nd highest explosive run rate and the 4th most rushing yards per game. And this trickles down to Mr. Jaylen Warren. RB34 in the ranks. I agree with the RB3 status, but he could be an RB2 this week if he gets in the end zone. And I know we haven't seen that over the last few weeks, but it can happen. I mean, honestly, you can build a case that he's kind of due. He's kind of due to score by now. So if that happens this week, since his return, he's been averaging almost 12 touches per game, 45.3 total yards per game. You toss a touchdown over that type of stat line, we're talking about low-end RB2 possibly this week. And what we saw to Warren last week, I specifically want to highlight here. Maybe the first time all year we've seen him remotely healthy, and this really bears itself out in the tackle breaking metrics. Last week, Jaylen Warren, 44% missed tackle rate. He hasn't sniffed anywhere close to that the entire season. So, in a good matchup, can he be more efficient with his touches? Possibly, considering his health is improving. And the matchup dictates if they are up in this game late, especially, and I'm not specifically saying they're going to rout the Commanders. I don't think that's going to happen. But even in a competitive game, Pittsburgh, if they have a lead, salting away the clock, it's not just going to be Najee getting carries. It's going to be Jaylen Warren too. Consider both of these guys for your lineups this week. Okay, over to the number 1 player on this list, and I've talked about him a few different times, and I don't know if people are listening, so I'm going to turn up the volume. And we're going to discuss Rachaad White again. And yes, I know, I have not liked Rachaad White in previous years, even this draft season. It's because Rachaad White was dependent totally on volume. He wasn't efficient. This year, we have seen a totally new version of Rachaad White. Maybe something that's just better offense, better offensive line, or the reduction in the workload has helped him be more efficient with his touches. Like since week 7, this man has been the RB9 in fantasy points per game. He is 20th in missed tackles forced per attempt over the season and 13th in yards after contact per attempt. Those are numbers that Rachaad White has never sniffed anywhere close to that in his career. And you're looking at the matchup this week and you're saying, oh, but they get San Francisco. That's a tough run defense. Well, actually, not so much. They're middle of the road as far as rushing, 15th in missed tackle rate, 9th most yards after contact per attempt allowed. But really what I want to highlight here is Baker Mayfield's going to throw the ball. We know that's going to happen. Since we've lost Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, the running backs have been a very big part of this passing attack, and that's going to continue this week. Since week 7, we're talking about Rachaad White is at almost a 12% target share, averaging almost 42 receiving yards per game, and now he gets matched up in a game where they're probably trailing. Okay, so wheels up for White, more pass game usage, throwing the ball more, and a defense that has allowed the 8th most receiving yards and the 11th highest yards per reception. Can't talk apparently. The 11th highest yards per reception to running backs this season. This all leads to Rachaad White could be an RB2. Hell, could be an RB1 this week. We've already seen that run out happen before. It could happen again this week. All right, everyone, that's my top 8 players for you to consider to be higher on than ECR is over at FantasyPros.com. Again, head over to FantasyPros.com, check out the primer, read up, baby, because I want you to get all of the wins. And if you're having a hard time dealing with all of your leagues, look, we're here to help. Use the multi-league assistant. Get those W's, and I will see you again in Week 11.